There's just about a month to go until state lawmakers go on summer break. But before then, they have a lot of work to do, like implementing the recreational marijuana law, for one thing. Both the House and Senate have proposals that would alter the voter-passed law, one more drastically than the other, and the two sides are working on a compromise on a self-imposed deadline of Friday. Then there's the budget, seemingly in limbo following several monthly revenue reports showing the state is not taking in as much money as it thought. I'm joined now by two of the three most powerful people. Wait a second, you're probably the two most, well, whatever. Two very powerful people from Beacon Hill. House Speaker Robert DeLeo, Senate President Stanley Rosenberg. It's great to see you both. Thanks, gentlemen, for being here. So we're about to do the first ever live conference committee on air. Is that okay with you? Sure, let's do it.
None of the conferees are here. How are we going to do
Yes,
that?
they are. The marijuana thing. Is this going to get done by the end of the week, realistically, Mr. Speaker?
I think that my discussions today, that I found that they are having fruitful conversations, so to speak. So
the answer is yes.
I'm hopeful.
So he's more than doubling, he meaning the House, more than doubling the tax to 28 cents. You keep it where the ballot question was at 12. A person like me would say, well, they'll settle somewhere in the 15 or 16 cent range. That's what's going to happen, yes?
So we have to keep an open mind at the table, and Senator Jalen, her big worry is that we not feed the black market, and the tax rate can have an impact on that.
Which she thinks 28 cents would do, yes?
She thinks 28 is too high, but, you know, they'll negotiate. They'll figure it out.
It'll end up in the middle, yes?
They're good people.
I suppose there could be some negotiation.
Okay. The one, though, that seems to be the tougher nut to crack is the whole issue of who has the power to decide whether a pot shop or some establishment related to marijuana can be banned. You stick essentially with what the ballot question said.
Yes.
Voters themselves make that decision. You took away the power from voters in the House and gave it to elected officials. Quickly, if you can, Mr. Speaker, what's the rationale for having elected officials rather than the people, the ballot? The 1.8 million people who voted for the ballot question wanted, which is real people.
Yeah, I think, first of all, expense in having a town or city, go out to vote, and timing as well. I think those were the two major issues.
But the voters said they wanted that, no?
Well, I think that, I think that in terms of getting a quicker decision and getting a less expensive decision, I think our plan would be able to work.
Does the House plan honor the spirit of the voter-passed law, Senate President?
So on the Senate side, what we looked at was 39 communities went to the ballot and turned it down, that is, banned it from their community, and about 120 communities are in the process of changing their bylaws and zoning. So roughly half of the communities have already actually used the mechanisms in the ballot question, and it's working. And so our feeling was if half of the communities have already pretty much taken care of it, the other half of the communities can probably follow suit well enough with what's in the ballot.
So you don't want to answer my question about whether or not the House violated the spirit, is that correct?
I think we're heading in the right path by trying to keep it with the voters.
The ballot measure, if I'm correct, last question on the marijuana thing, my understanding is it ensures communities most affected negatively by the war on drug have a proverbial seat at the table when this new industry comes to town. You preserve that language, is that correct?
Say that part again?
The whole notion that the communities that are most affected by the war on drugs will be part of the...
Yeah, and we enhance that, actually, with some other provisions. But it's really important that those communities not become sort of mecca for pot shops on the one hand and local business people being prohibited by the way the system operates, being overtaken and crushed by the big corporations that are going to come into the state and try to get control.
What do you do about that, Mr. Speaker?
Actually, we had an extensive conversation, I did myself, with the Black Latino Caucus, and as a result of that, we made some changes similar to what Stan was talking about.
There's a lot of good things in both bills on that issue. We should just do them all.
Okay, well, that conference committee issue is
I'd like
resolved.
to say, if you take a look at both bills, yes, there are differences. Obviously, you talked about taxes. Obviously, you talked about the municipal vote. But in actuality, I think there are by far more matters than not that there is agreement. So although some folks had probably emphasized the disagreement, I think there's a whole lot of agreement in there as well.
One other ballot thing I want to talk to you about. You both supported the millionaire's tax going on the ballot in November of 1980. They like to call it the Fair Share Amendment, but a tax on people who earn more than $1 million a year for that excess money. I assume that's because you think the state needs the money rather than it just be nice to have. You're both nodding in agreement. So What if it's defeated? Is there a plan B? I mean, I assume you're both counting on January of 2019, $2 billion being available to the state. Let's assume the voters say, I don't like this idea. They vote it down. What do you do then?
So the Senate's got, in our version of the budget, a commission to look at our tax expenditures and to see which among those tax expenditures still make sense.
Those are
these
tax
days.
breaks for businesses.
Those are tax
and
breaks for,
individuals,
yeah. And so that's something we should do whether or not the ballot question passes, because the problem is our tax system now is a 20th century tax system in a 21st century economy, which is why our budget is in a bit of a disarray, because the revenues aren't coming in because of the changes in the economy, and so we've really got to come to grips with that.
Mr. Speaker, you've been far closer to the governor on sort of the no tax side of things. I think it's a fair statement. But explain to me, how can a governor who says, yeah, you can tax Airbnb to level the playing field, and yes, you can not only impose, I propose you impose, a pretty large fee on employers who choose not to cover their own employers with health insurance. How can somebody who supports those two things, him, say he's a no-tax
Well, I think
governor?
you'd have to ask him. But if I
What
was,
would you say?
But
Look
if
at the
I was
smile
to
on your
suggest,
face.
Well, if I was to suggest Airbnb, obviously, is a new industry. Marijuana, new industry here. So I think coming into the Commonwealth with these new industries, obviously similar to Uber and Lyft and whatnot, we have to take a look at a structure.
But healthcare is not a new industry.
Healthcare is not a new industry.
That's he's calling it a fee. In the old days, Republicans used to call them taxes.
And we've got some real major issues relative to our budget situation, especially as to healthcare. You and I both know, and I think Stan would agree, that if you take a look in terms of how much our healthcare eats up in terms of our budget, it gives us very little in which that we can talk about the programs in terms of expansion or any new programs coming into the state.
Speaking of healthcare and speaking of the governor, yesterday he says $8 billion cost if the Senate bill went into effect over the next decade. 264,000 people lose health coverage. I assume you both roughly agree with that. Is Baker striking the right chords in your estimation in terms of those things which Trump is proposing that you find most destructive to Massachusetts?
I'm totally glad that he's speaking out on the health care piece, because it's billions and billions of dollars that we can't afford to lose here in Massachusetts. And even on immigration, he made a very clear statement when the president started messing around with that. And he basically said, this is about identifying people who are criminals or gang members or who are terrorists. And those are the people you ought to focus on. I was pleased when he said that publicly, and he came right out of the gate and said that. And we just have to make sure our state policy aligns with that view, because I think that's totally fair. Nobody wants those folks disrupting our communities. But the other immigrants who are here, they are contributing enormously to our economy and to our Commonwealth.
Are you mostly satisfied with Baker's approach to the Trump?
Yes. I mean, obviously, as a Republican governor, I think at times he's obviously in a difficult position. But on the other hand, let me just say that, you talk about health care and what's going on in Washington. If either the House or the Senate plan, and probably even in particular more the Senate plan than the House, which sort of surprises me, we're going to be in this discussion in terms of money is going to be, we're going to be coming back and talking about that a whole lot more extensively, because we could be talking anywhere from, $1 billion a whole in our
Charlie
budget.
Baker said $8 billion over 10 years.
Over 10 years, yeah. So a little over $1 billion a year.
You've both spoken pretty positively of the Republican governor. Can you imagine a circumstance where you could cast a vote for this guy next November?
I think it's too early to even discuss
but
that.
It's not impossible?
But I just want to see who the Democratic nominee is.
But it's not impossible.
I think it's much too premature to be talking about an election.
But you're not saying no. What do you say?
I'm not saying yes.
I'm not saying yes.
I enjoy working with the governor, but I'm a lifelong Democrat,
so
and I plan to support the Democratic nominee. But in the meantime, our job is to govern. That's the politics. But every day we work together, the three of us and our branches, to govern.
We only have 1 minute left. Speaking of working together, I take personal credit for bringing the two of you together. I think your first meal together was
fantastic.
After a show here.
Yeah.
In a moment
Are you buying after this? Or?
In a moment of, I would. In a moment of total seriousness, and don't play games with this thing. Okay. What's the most difficult part of working with him? Is it? And I'm going to ask him. Is it an ideological divide? Is it stylistic? I mean, obviously you're working hard to work well, but.
I don't find it difficult working with him at all. We have different branches that he's got 160 members that he has to work with. I have 40 members. And we have different styles and different approaches, and our job is to find common ground and build good policy, and I think we do that.
Okay, obviously you have a big problem with him, I assume, correct? No, I'm serious.
Oh, yeah.
How big is the problem?
But there's got to be certain things. Do you not have a problem?
Look, let's be. I mean, obviously, philosophically,
Yeah.
you know, we're somewhat different.
You are.
Obviously,
I'm
you
from
look at
Revere,
Brit-
he's
Okay,
from Winthrop.
okay,
Yeah,
but
Of course
what?
we have a
But
difference.
what?
But the thing I'd like to point out, I think, and I'd say this to anyone who will ask, I think what's good about working with Stan is, first of all, I like him personally. So I think that takes off the edge.
Yeah.
I mean, he should agree with me a whole lot more, I think, in terms of coming over a little bit more to the moderate side. But having said that, I think at the end of the day, I think we both share the same type of philosophy, is to get things done, not to let those political philosophies get in our way. If I have to go a little bit more towards him, if he has to go a little bit more towards me, let's get it done. Let's not have happen in Massachusetts what we're seeing obviously happening in Washington, what we're seeing happening in many states throughout the country. Let's work together and get things done, and that's what's happening in Massachusetts.
I have a cold, so all I can do is give you a
All
fist
right,
bump.
buddy.
Good to see you, Mr. Speaker.
And by the way, it's time for you to come my way this time. It's your turn to come my way.
Gentlemen, thank you both.